Hello and welcome to the Avrum Rosensweig Show.
Welcome to one of the internet's best podcasts, where we dive deep into the lives of the extraordinary and fascinating people who leave an indelible mark on our world. Join us as we explore their captivating stories, remarkable achievements, and unique perspectives that shape history and inspire generations. Get ready to embark on a journey through the lives of inspiring people unlike any other.
Hello, folks. My name is Avrum Rosensweig. There are some conversations that entertain, and then there are conversations that reach into the deepest places of what it means to be human, to love, to lose, to survive, and somehow to continue breathing after the unimaginable. Today's guest is journalist, author, cultural commentator, and now memoirist of extraordinary courage, Danielle Crittenden. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you, Avrum. It's good to see you again.
Lovely to see you too. For decades, Danielle has been one of the most thoughtful voices writing about family, about culture, women, politics, and modern life. But nothing in her acclaimed career prepared her or her husband, David Frum, for the devastating event that shattered their world in February 2024, the sudden death of her beloved 32-year-old daughter, Miranda. In her remarkable and heartbreaking memoir, Dispatches from Grief, A Mother's Journey Through the Unthinkable, Danielle writes with stunning honesty about the moment life split permanently into two realities, the world before Miranda's death and the world after. This is not simply a book about grief. It is a meditation on motherhood, memory, trauma, resilience, faith, friendship, marriage, and the often unbearable fragility of life. Danielle takes us into the surreal landscape mourners inhabit, the police phone call that changes everything, the impossible task of choosing a burial dress, the silence of friends who do not know what to say, and the quiet fellowship among those who belong to what she calls the world's worst club, parents who have lost children. But this conversation is also deeply about Miranda herself, a brilliant, charismatic, funny, adventurous young woman who filled rooms with life, a daughter whose spirit still radiates through every page Danielle has written, a woman who loved fiercely, traveled widely, cultivated friendships like flowers, and whose presence continues to shape the lives of those who loved her. This is an emotional, profound, and ultimately deeply human conversation about what happens when tragedy arrives without warning and how love continues even after death. David Brooks, New York Times columnist and bestseller, wrote about Danielle in her book, Dispatches from Grief, moves with the power of a freight train over rough terrain. Danielle Crittenden makes us eyewitnesses to the hour-by-hour crawl through grief. What I will remember forever is the transformation of the griever, the steady, unpredictable process of ripping and restitching, and the resilient enormity of mother's love. Crittenden has been through hell, but has not emerged with empty hands. Ladies and gentlemen, a very special woman, a mom, a wife, and a writer, Danielle Crittenden. Welcome.
Thank you for such a beautiful introduction.
Oh, you are welcome. And you and I go back a number of years, and I have to tell you, I've always found you to be a beautiful person. I really have. Gentle, loving, soft. When Marty and I were on radio, we met you having to do with Facebook in Canada, I believe it was.
It would have been the Huffington Post Canada, where I was enlisted to come up and run their blog when it first started
Yes.
back in 2011, I think.
Right. And it's a rough industry. It's a tough industry. Many people are not so kind, but you were so loving to us, and you gave us a sense of feeling very safe in the tumultuous world of podcast and writing. So thank you for that.
It's my pleasure. You were a great talent, and I was always delighted to find great talent.
Thank you. I appreciate you saying that. It's probably an unreasonable question for a mom who has lost their eldest child, Miranda, God bless her soul. But how are you doing? How is your heart and soul?
Well, I actually said to my husband, David, the other day, we're 2 years on from this. And until the book came out, I wrote the book, and then it just came out at the beginning of May. And I said, the seabed had kind of settled, and now I'm stirring it up again, and so it's it's a hard thing to quote unquote promote. You know, I've had a lot of trepidation about doing it, but the reaction that I've been receiving from fellow grieving parents, from those who know people who have suffered this kind of loss, excuse me, has made it, you know, whatever toll it takes on me has made it worth it.
It must be very, very challenging when you consider, as a writer, what do writers do? They write. You know, you actually said it in an interview, when there's problems in your life or there's challenges in your life, what do? You write about it.
Mm-hmm.
I've had 3 heart attacks. And after my first heart attack, I wrote an article in the Canadian Jewish News. And my heart doctor said to me, Avrum, why are you doing that? That's very intimate. I said, that's why I wrote about it.
Yes.
Similar sense that you have?
Sorry, I didn't hear that question.
Had a similar sense that you have. This is intimate. I want to share it. I want people to be able to perhaps get better through my words.
Well, it's interesting because I'm not just a writer, but I began life as a reporter.
Yes.
I grew up. My stepfather, Peter Worthington, he had been a legendary foreign correspondent, and then he went on to found the Toronto Sun, and then, you know, he was a great writer, editor, columnist there. And sort of growing up in that milieu under his tutelage, I began my life as a city reporter. I actually often covered children who got murdered, and I would have to go to their parents' houses and collect photos of the children. And, you know, just having, especially at the age of 19 and 20, literally no idea what they could be going through. And, but I learned back then that when something happens to you, you write about it, you know? And so when I began, the title Dispatches from Grief really means dispatches. When a tragedy of this kind happens to you and your whole world splits in half, changes, I liken it to being sent to this now foreign alternative universe where you land there, you're deported there, you're there whether you like it or not, everything is different. And it was so overpowering. It was so, the pain was so great, was so crippling. Everything looking the same, but not being the same. Since that phone call, you think you're the same, but you're not the same. I just began jotting notes about myself. Not even, I think, to comprehend it, because it was just going to be incomprehensible, and I think will always be incomprehensible. But the things that were happening to me had never happened to me. The physical pain, the emotional pain, the inability to do anything. Just, I couldn't write, I couldn't do anything anymore. Anything that gave me pleasure, I stopped doing. And so I started to take notes about myself as if I were not like I'm journaling, but as if I'm covering myself and what I was going through. And so, for example, you know, after I would find myself howling on the floor, curled up, sobbing, and then I'd gradually get my composure back. And then I would go to my office and I would write down what that was, what it was like to experience. And as if writing to tell people from the world I'd left what it was like now over here. And that's how it began. It began as a collection of notes in a, you know, reporter's journal. And gradually they just expanded. And at one point I thought, maybe I'll publish this as an essay. I don't know. And then eventually it worked its way into a book.
Yeah, you talked about the suicidal pain that you went through. Mm-hmm. You speak about the howling more than the crying.
Yes.
That you and David went through. Would it be correct to say that when you write, you almost remove yourself from the situation for a little while, and that in itself can give you some solace?
Yes, you put it well, and that's the reporter training. Because when you're journaling, you're not removing yourself. you're digging into yourself. And this was removing myself and trying to observe what it was like. And I don't know that I don't think it helped me at all. I just needed to do it. I think it's just in my newspaper family blood, that's just what I had to do. And having published it, people will ask, well, is it cathartic? Has it helped you? And I think, no, not really. But what has helped me is, again, the response I've had from fellow grievers who, I think, like me at the time when I went to look for anything that would help me through this, all the literature on grief, all the resources on grief, looking for something that addressed and would heal this pain or acknowledge this pain or speak to this pain. I couldn't find it, except in actually the things I started to read were like Holocaust memoirs, because those were people who had lost everything, who had suffered terrible, murders to their family. And I needed to know what they went through and how they got through it. And so when I wrote this and I showed one of the early drafts to a mother in my situation, she said, thank you. Now I have something to show people. Mm-hmm. So I think it's not just that you want help recovering, because losing a child, I don't think, is something you ever recover from, but you want your pain seen. You want people to understand this is a different level, a different order to grief.
I must tell you, write magnificently. If it's appropriate, I really benefited from your writings, from your book. I don't want to say I enjoyed it, because it's a difficult read. By the way, very similar to a book that I'm just completing now by Rachel Poland Goldberg.
Yes.
Have you read her book?
I have not yet read it. I've seen some interviews, and just when you think you've entered your own circle of hell, and you discover there are other circles of hell. Hers is one of them. My husband David's one of, like a second cousin was one of the hostages, didn't come back. And that happened in October, and Miranda died the following February. So we were talking to these relatives in Washington at our dinner table. And then who knew, I couldn't understand then what they were going through, and who knew, in February we would have a glimpse. But yeah, I get now emails and letters from people that it begins, when I lost both my children in a car crash, or when my only son died of such a, it's wrenching. And you just realize this alternative universe, as I wrote, is very well populated, and more populated than you think before you enter it.
Rachel, in her book, in her prologue, Danielle,
mm-hmm.
she wrote this incredible piece. I've never read anything like it, in which she explains the physical components of her son. She talks about his nose, his button nose. She talks about his ears, his eyes, and his mouth. And I was thinking to myself as I read your book that you did something very similar when you went to see Miranda after she had passed away. You saw the crown of her head, and you saw her golden hair. You talked about her beautiful blue-green eyes. And I thought to myself, a mother knows these things, right? You know every inch of your child, how they look, what they look like, how they present themselves to the world. It was very, very sad, but it was very beautiful what you wrote.
Well, thank you. I mean, as a mother, well, as anyone who goes through probably really any kind of tragedy, but especially this one, you are in real shock. You're in real trauma. Your brain is not processing what is happening. And until you see your dead child physically, it's hard to accept. You think there's been some colossal mistake. They've mixed her up with someone else. Even though you're going through all the bureaucracy that entails, you're getting the death reports and the paperwork from the funeral home, but you're saying, oh, no, it's not Miranda. And then when you walk in, and as her mother, she had this beautiful rose gold hair.
Yes.
And it was in this beautiful historic funeral home in New York on the Upper West Side. And she was in this chapel that looked like something out of Walt Disney, honestly, like Beauty and the Beast, which had been her favorite of the Disney princesses. And so there's these arching chapel with stars painted on the ceiling, and she was laid out under it with a royal blue blanket pulled up, but just up past her forehead. And when we entered, I saw the back of her head. And there was no mistaking that was Miranda. That was so familiar with the top of her head. That was what I kissed every night as a child when she went to bed. That's where I kissed her when she was an adult. That's what I stroked when she was sick. And so seeing that is leveling, but it confirms that, this wasn't a rounding error by God. She really is gone.
Did she love your kisses?
She was very prickly about kisses sometimes. She especially didn't like you to mess with her hair, which I understand. But that's why I think I focused on the top of her head, because it was the least intrusive place where I could kiss her. It doesn't mean she wasn't affectionate, but sometimes I'd kiss her cheek, but throughout her life, that was the spot I kissed.
Another thing that jumped out at me in your book was the incredible love that your family has for each other. At the time of an interview that I saw, you and David had been married for 37 years. Your son, Nat, your daughter, V, who's 10 years younger than Miranda, Nat 2 years younger. And there was this beautiful piece at the beginning of the book where David, as you described it in the book, was howling with grief.
Mm-hmm.
And B came into his room, and his response was like a father would often say, is, it's best you don't see me like this. And in her mind, she said, no, you're my dad. And she went and she held him, as she had done many times afterwards, right?
Yeah, he had gone. So I think it's safe to say that in general, men and women, or fathers and mothers, grieve a little differently.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just all out there. I was a spluttering, howling mess. And I can talk about that in a moment, as a mother, and the effect you realize you're having on your children, but you can't actually control. Whereas David could be kind of buttoned down during the day, but then, especially in those early days, he would go and lie in the bed that was in Miranda's bed in Miranda's room. And that's B. I've quoted her a few times in the book because first of all, she's a beautiful writer, but she made these notes herself when she was in college. She was a junior in college when this happened. And she wrote about hearing her father howling through the wall, because their walls adjoin. And as you say, going in and holding him. And I just felt so helpless as a mother for the first time in my life, not being able to comfort my children. That was horrible. And I felt so guilty about it, but I couldn't do anything about it. And I've, heard subsequently that, when I've spoken to people who've lost siblings, that they remember that. They remember having to comfort their parents. The roles reverse because, and sibling grief is its own circle of hell.
Yes, it is.
But in this case, I lost that power to comfort my children, and it was just part of the general distress.
But Nate said, we cannot let our family shatter. This is not what would be best for Miranda, right?
Right. He said very early on, we can't let this shatter Miranda, that would be the worst thing we could do for her memory. And he said that, I don't know, day 3 or 4. And I held those words very, very close. And, the shattering with a death like this and in a family can take a long time. There's the first explosion that blows up everything, but then you're still having to regroup and reknit, and you can't always you're not going to get back to where you were as a person or even as a family. And so coming through this, I think, has been difficult for all of us. That, Nat and B, I mean, Miranda was like the leader of all things. She was the eldest. They were all tight. They looked up to her. I mean, among other things, Nat said, he said, now I'm not going to know who to ask which restaurant I should go to. Like, she just played such a central role in their lives. And it isn't to say they weren't close before she died, but suddenly the relationship, there's another hole blown there. And then dealing with their parents in ways that they've never seen. And over time, making the effort, and it is an effort for everyone to try and not lose each other or lose connection to each other through the grief, because the grief is just so incapacitating.
You talked about how David said to you at some point that it's really important. I guess in essence, what he was saying was that we see each other, that we're there for one another, that I can pull you out of grief at any moment if I need to, or vice versa. And what I wondered about was, I'm assuming certainly in the beginning when Miranda passed, can you see outside of yourself at all? Could you see your husband, David, at the airport when you arrived in New York? Were you able to, feel out of you?
I think we just felt at that point numb fellow combatants. I'm sorry, I keep using war terms, but it's very, they're very.
You do actually, yes. Yes.
It's really what I imagine it feels like. Your trench has been blown up, you're reeling, you're kind of coughing, and you're just going through the motions of what you need to do in the next 48 hours to get done. And then afterwards, after you're sort of, and if you want, we can talk about the Jewish rituals of grief, which really, really helped me through those early days. After, the child is buried, then the real grief hits. Mm-hmm. And you come out of the shock. And David said, and as you said, we've been married, it'll be 38 years this year, that we were fortunate that we had a good and strong marriage before this happened. But even in a good and strong marriage, you retreat, and as you say, the grief, it can be all consuming, and grief is very selfish that way. It just takes over you, and I think especially as a mother. And again, fairly early on, when my inclination was to go under the bed and curl up and not come out, he came to me and he said, we can't let each other disappear into different silos of grief, was the way he put it. We have to go through this together or it will destroy us. And I took that to heart too. And that was among the things that got me, he would just, every time I curled up and howled, he'd just pull me to him and hold me. And I noticed and became aware of his patterns of grief, which was in the daytime to kind of retreat. And then it would hit him at 3 and 4 in the morning. And he would try and hide it from me. And I realized that wasn't good for him. And it wasn't good for me, because I think he was also, he was worried that he didn't want to set me off anymore, or he could undo me. And actually, when I got him to talk about it, or was there for him at 3 a.m. You know, as he said at one point, he said, we're the only two people in the world who knows exactly what the other is going through.
Yes.
Actually
Yeah.
talking about it was the thing that helped keep us together and helped get us, to this point.
Were Nat and B more apt to speak about what you were all going through? Did you find them more emotionally open than perhaps David or yourself?
No, I was probably the most emotionally open for good and ill. Again, I think that was very hard on my children. I think actually me talking about this book now is stressful for them.
Mhm.
B was at that point, as I said, a junior. She'd been on her year abroad. She had been in France when this happened, so she'd had to come back from France. And then she went back, and fortunately, she had a good circle of friends there. But she kind of threw herself into her schoolwork. I told her at one point, B, if you'd be, dropped out and become an addict, I would have totally understood. But her response was to completely throw herself into the academics, and she ended up reading all these ancient texts on grief, and that's how she sort of worked her way along. And then Nat, who was married at the time, I think he has been, less open with it and coping more privately and also with his wife. But, we now learn to say to each other, is it okay if I talk about this? Or is it okay if I tell you something I was just thinking about, Miranda? Because it remains delicate. We all remain vulnerable, and you want to respect how the other person is grieving before landing something on them. So it's a dance. Grief is also a very difficult dance with others that you have to learn and walk through, dance through.
Not only is it a dance, but you said there's a therapist who said that grief has a very big eye. What is that?
Yes, it's
It's
and
everywhere.
that's part of the selfishness that, especially early on, I could only see where Miranda wasn't. And when it's your child and you're in your home, she's in every corner. She's on every walk I take across the street with the dog. She's, in the supermarket aisles with the products I used to buy for her. She's in my car when my car asked me to connect to Miranda's iPhone. She's embedded in every aspect of our physical lives, but also our emotional lives. That, by the time she was 32, she wasn't just a daughter anymore. She had become a very close, even best adult friend. And she was incredibly perceptive about us and about the world and about others. And it was very beautiful that we were at a point where we could just sit up together and talk and talk. And now I don't have that person to talk to anymore.
You said that on Valentine's Day, which your entire family seems to relate to differently. David, for sure, he went off and did some gig somewhere.
Yeah,
You went, you went to an ambassador's affair or something along those lines.
Yeah.
You called your daughter, and you were FaceTiming, and you said, "This is what mothers and daughters do. They put on makeup together while they speak."
Yeah.
And that was a very, very touching moment. I think that was the last moment that you actually spoke to her.
In fact, I didn't speak to her. We were texting, which, in the days after, I was just like banging my head against the floor, like, oh man, if I just called the night before, you get into these obsessions and you have to remind yourself, well, it's very highly unlikely that you would have thought she was going to die 2 days later, so who knew? But yes, she sent me a really beautiful selfie of herself as she was about to go out to some Valentine's Day event in Brooklyn where she was, and I was getting ready to go out to a Valentine's Day event in DC. And so that was
Yet a mother is a mother is a mother. You looked at that picture and you saw that perhaps her skin was a bit too pale, right?
I noticed she was pale for the past 8 months, and I kept commenting on it to her. And she was not lax at all with her health. She went to doctors. She'd had a rare but non-malignant brain tumor removed 5 years before she died, and it had eaten her pituitary gland, and she had to medicate for that. But you can medicate for that. And as the surgeons and her endocrinologist said to her, you medicate it, you live a long and normal life. And so they didn't tell her that if you get any of that cocktail wrong, and of course you adjust it for side effects and things. And I think she felt she had gotten to a very good place with it. She felt good. But none of them said, oh, and by the way, if you get this wrong, you could suddenly drop dead. And she was looking very pale. And I did tell her, I said, are you sure you're okay? And I even took her to my endocrinologist. And, for the last couple of weeks, she thought she just had was fighting a bad cold, but she traveled. She'd been seeing friends in Los Angeles. There was no obvious sign that this was going to happen.
You talked about the Jewishness of losing your daughter. I think at some point in your life, Shiva was not something that you were terribly crazy about. You sort of defined it as, well, I'm going to sit in one room and all these people are going to come and talk to me and make me nuts. But when Miranda passed, that was a different story. There's one or two quotes here from the Torah that I would like to share with you, and then I want to hear about your Shiva experience. King David, he cried after losing his son Absalom, and he said in the most touching terms, perhaps one of the rawest moments in all of Torah, Tanakh, Bini Avshalom, Bini Avshalom, Mi yitain muti ani tachtecha. My son Absalom, my son Absalom, if only I had died instead of you. Mm-hmm. Samuel 2. Does that resonate with you?
Oh my goodness, yes. Very early on, we got connected to our fellow deportees in the alternative universe. One of them, and I tell this in the book, was a Hollywood agent who had lost his daughter at exactly the same age as suddenly a year before we did. And so we called him. I remember very vividly, the phone is sitting on the kitchen island on speaker, and David and I are talking to him. And he said, okay, let's say, the angel comes down to you and says, Danielle, David, if Miranda could come back, but the only way she could come back is for you both to jump off a building, would you be willing to do that? And without hesitation, David and I both said yes. And then he said, well, that's not on the table. Which was a very Hollywood expression, but it's true. It's not on the table. There is nothing bringing her back. And that's, part of the reckoning you have to go through, because even after I've seen her and buried her, I still think that somehow, or if I had done something differently, or what if I'd been more forceful about making her go to the doctor, would this have been avoided? But in the end, it's not on the table. You have to accept, or not accept, but you have to acknowledge that she's gone, and now you proceed from there.
With that, I'd like to tell you another quote, but before I do, a mom's love stores up inside of them from second one, even in vitro, we'll say. Now Miranda's not here with us on earth. God willing, you'll meet with her again. What do you do with that incredible amount of love that you have inside of you for her?
People often will say, grief is the price of love. And I've come to think that grief is the measure of love. And a mother's love knows no end. And so as long as I do things for her, so after she died, and as you know, in the Jewish tradition, you have a year to put a headstone up, which is good, because it's nice to go through. I think it recognizes the sort of 4 seasons since the death, and to process it better, and to also plan of what you want to do on the site that they are buried. And so through that, I'm a, avid gardener, and I wanted to plan a wildflower garden for her. And even though it was a grim task when you think of what you're actually doing, as long as I was doing that, I felt I was still taking care of her. As long as even talking about this book, as difficult as it is, I'm still projecting her into the world. I'm still her mother in some way. And so I think as long as I do that, I'll still feel like an active mother. But beyond that, the love does not cease. Love really does transcend death. And I think not just for your children, but for everyone that you love. And in the end, that's honestly all that's worth living for in the end, you know? So some people have asked me, you know, well, was it worth it? And like a friend of mine who hadn't had children, and he was asking this, and again, I wrote about this. He was inquiring, you know, he hadn't had children. He saw his friend, whom he had once known as this very, you know, happy person, talking about suicide. And he said, Danielle, I can't, you know, I've never seen you like this. Was it worth it to have Miranda if you were going to experience this pain? And I said, yes, in fact, I wish it could have been me rather than Miranda who had died. And he got quite teary-eyed and he said, I have never experienced a love so great that I would give myself before I would give the other person. And that's what a parent's love is. That's what a mother's love is. And I'm grateful for the time I did have her. You know, I wouldn't have traded that for the world.
Are you patient with people's courageous questions to you? That's a courageous question he asked.
Well, look, I write about the different encounters. I think, as you said up the top, the different encounters you have with people who are not familiar with this level of tragedy or really any grief. And you know, people will say, and people who are grieving will complain that people will say the dumbest things or the most insensitive things. And I just have real sensitivity for that, or sympathy and empathy for it, because until you experience this, you don't know what to say, really. I mean, what do you say? As many people say, which is also annoying, I can't even imagine. You think, no, you can't. Lucky you don't want to, but you nod your head and say thank you. But it's, people care about you, and the people who see their friend or their relative in such pain want to comfort you, and they want to give you hope. And it's a good impulse, but it's not the impulse you want. It's you want people to lean into your tragedy. You want them to acknowledge that this has been a terrible thing that has befallen you, and have some sense of the pain you must be enduring. So when someone, you know, says, Danielle, you're strong, you'll get through this, they're trying to comfort me, but it's the last thing I want to hear.
My sister lost her husband to a murder.
Oh.
And obviously she went through Shiva. She's a religious woman. You were somewhat instructional in your book about things to say, not to say, what works, what doesn't work. As an example, you said, don't say, call me if you need me, because it puts the onus on the griever. My sister, Danielle, someone came to the Shiva of her husband, David, whom had hurt David before he died. She asked him to leave the Shiva.
I get that.
Do you get it? You do get it?
Yeah. You know, if I ever come across one of Miranda's ex-boyfriends, you know, if someone hurt her, I would let them have it.
You would.
I would. I can't help it. But yes,
You're a mom.
No, but I get that you caused my husband, you caused my daughter pain, yes. And now he or she is gone. You know, I'm not going to forgive you for that. I mean, that sounds hard, but you caused this person pain, and it will never be undone. You will never be able to make amends for it. And so goodbye. I get that.
Another quote that I wanted to share with you was Um, Aaron's two sons, were killed actually by God in the temple
Mhm.
for doing something wrong, according to God.
Mildly so, right? Very,
It's a powerful,
yeah,
difficult story.
yeah.
Excuse me. After the sudden death of Nadav and Avihu, his boys, here's what the Torah says about his grief, Danielle. Vayidom Aaron, and Aaron was silent. It's in Leviticus 10:3. Sometimes the Torah teaches that grief is beyond words. Aaron's silence became one of Judaism's deepest symbols of shock, sorrow, and spiritual devastation. It's phenomenal. He didn't say a word. He was quiet. Does that resonate with you?
I think it resonates to this degree after the initial shock. Again, and with people not, except your fellow travelers, people not knowing about this kind of grief, uh, you tend to go silent about it because I think there's a expectation that you are on some sort of upper trajectory towards healing and acceptance,
Yes.
and that after 3 months or 6 months, let alone a year, people will stop talking to you about it, people stop asking about it, and won't understand if you display any kind of sign of not getting past it. And in some cases, I don't think anyone ever gets past it, but I think some people learn to carry it better than others. I mean, some people, just the statistics on mortality among parents and among mothers whose children died, your mortality goes up like within 5 years. You're at much higher likelihood to die, and that's because part of it, you can succumb to addiction, and I get that. Some people will commit suicide. I get that. And also, you just stop caring and taking care of yourself,
Hmm.
and you just succumb to some health thing that could have been avoided if you were paying attention. So, so you just learn to be quiet about it. I joked, I didn't want to become a grief bore. And so I tend now, with the exception of talking about this book, I don't talk about it. I don't bring it up with new people. And I know for many whom I've met in this situation, I think they also feel very lonely after. So, like, I've been very lucky to have David. I've been very lucky with my children and my friends who have been very patient and able to go through it with me. But I think there are people who don't have that kind of support system, that social support system. For Judaism is good because it often provides that for you. And they get terribly lonely, and the world moves on and they don't. And then they feel bad that they don't.
Mhm. We talked a little bit before about Shiva, and just to explain it to our listeners who don't know what it is, it's essentially after someone passes away who's very close to you, a husband, a wife, a child, God forbid, as in your case. You sit for 7 days in your home.
Mhm.
And indeed, people do come and they do visit you. And there are rules for how one is supposed to act within a Shiva. I don't know if you know this, but according to halakha, Jewish law, when I come to visit you, I'm really not supposed to say anything to you. I'm supposed to allow you to speak first.
Mm.
What's your take on that?
There are so many of those little, I don't want to call them rules, but customs surrounding Shiva and other rituals. And look, if somebody speaks to me first, that's not going to be an issue, but I get it. I understand. Like, it's just what I discovered going through between the rituals between when Miranda died to when she was buried. There is such respect for the mourner. There's such respect for the dead person. One of the things that I've always just found so profoundly beautiful and was grateful even under these circumstances for was knowing that once Miranda was in the hands of the Jewish funeral home, they would treat her body as if she were a living person with that level of respect, that not even a bar of soap would be passed impersonally across her as if she were, dead, as if she were an inanimate object. And such care is taken, and that then that the body is never left alone. It's wrapped in a shroud. You don't have to pick out her prom dress or something, which is also a good thing. She's wrapped in a simple white linen shroud. And then somebody, whether it's a relative or somebody at the funeral home, as you know, Avrum, is always sitting outside her door.
Yes.
And I'm, that's just such a beautiful and thoughtful thing. And so one of the other rules of Shiva is when people come over, they're not allowed to ask you for anything. They get, they bring food. They understand that you're probably not thinking about what to cook for dinner that night.
Lots of food.
Lots of food.
Yeah.
They bring scotch.
And scotch.
and you're supposed to just be tended to. And again, that's an unbelievably thoughtful custom that in advance, as you noted, I'm a convert to Judaism. So, it's probably my inner Anglican, my inner WASP, that sort of initially rebelled at the idea that you were going to have to entertain all these people when they came through your door at the absolute worst moment of your life. And instead, once you get the ritual, it is the most comforting thing, because they know, and it's the 7 days is a reason that first week, every day of the week, you're going, this time last week, Miranda was alive. This hour last week, Miranda was alive. And they're getting you through that initial terrible, hard first week.
How did you choose your dress for the funeral?
Oh, this is actually a funny story. So Miranda at one point lived in Israel, in Tel Aviv, not because she was especially religious, but she found Tel Aviv so exciting, like a Paris crossed with a bazaar, with, the youthfulness, the vitality of it, the coffee house nature of it. She just adored. And she did some modeling. She was picked up as a model. So she became this really prominent fashion model in Israel. And she went to Paris, she went to Japan. But the bottom line is, even as a small child, she was interested in fashion, and she was always very chic, and she had a sharp eye. And if I bought something that she didn't think suited me or flattered me, she would tell me. And I'm going back to when she was a toddler. In fact, I write in the book that I'd take her with me to the department store, and she'd sit there on the little chair, and her feet weren't even touching the floor. And I'd put on something, and she'd say, "Mommy, that makes you look like a frog." And I'd say, "Miranda, no, I think it's nice. You look like a frog." And then I'd take it home, and David would say, "Yeah, she's right. You look like a frog." And back it would go. So I learned never, ever to second guess her taste. So when she died, B said, everything about this funeral had to be up to Miranda's standards. And he said, even in the depths of her grief, she said, "Mom, we have to look fabulous for Miranda." And so we very carefully chose what we thought Miranda would feel was chic enough to mourn her. So that was the story of what we decided to wear. I know in the more Jewish tradition is you probably go in rags, or
not so much.
but we wanted to respect Miranda's vibe and taste.
Has she come to you in a dream?
It's interesting. She was going to everybody else, and I was getting very annoyed, because I just wanted only in your dreams can you see somebody as they really were alive, experience them as they were alive. And she came to B, she came to Nat, and then she wouldn't come to me. And then by the time she did come to me, she was dying. She was falling apart. And I went to hug her, and she just kind of fell apart in my arms. And I woke up, extremely upset.
Yes.
I feel her much more awake. And there have been times, and, not to sound like a nut, but everybody I've ever spoken who's lost anyone says that they're close to says this, that there are things that happen that just can't be explained, that you get little signs, or sometimes I'll hear her voice sharply in my head. That is, I will often talk to her in my head, but there I am projecting what she might say about something. But there have been other times at sort of key moments through this where I've really felt her talk to me. And that's how I experience her. So I haven't been lucky enough to have a dream in which we're just hanging out together again, which I would love to have. But she has come to me, I feel strongly, in other ways.
Has she come to David?
David says no, but she did come to, he's had much better dreams with her. They've hung out together in his dreams. And he tells me the next day, and I get very jealous. He said that he feels her and he holds her, he can smell her hair. Wow. And he says it's very beautiful. It makes him really happy.
You decided at some point to switch where your daughter was buried.
Yeah. This is a very Jewish story.
It's a very Jewish story. When I read the piece,
oh dear,
there's a few things that jumped out at me that quite literally made me sob. I had to stop my research, and I sat here and I sobbed deeply, because you said, what is it like for a parent to see their child's name on a tombstone? And as a father of a 20-year-old son, you know how it goes.
Mm-hmm.
And I sobbed. Is that what you want from your book? Is that good that I did, or don't put your grief on me sort of thing?
No, I think it's a very human and natural response. Yeah, I mean, the whole thing, the Jewish story of the cemetery. Do you want me to tell that?
Yeah, tell the story. Tell the story. Yeah.
So complicating, because in Judaism, you try and get the body buried as quickly as possible. I mean, I know Jews now will get cremated or whatever, but the tradition that many stick to is within 3 or 4 days, or 3 days, I think, is the maximum that you should be in the ground. And this is a dizzying pace when you're suffering shock, let alone trying to plan a funeral, that's why there's a bit of relief that you don't have to plan the gravesite. But we wanted her to be buried near our summer cottage, which is 2 hours east of Toronto, where we've spent every summer before Miranda was even born. And just a year or two before, David and I had begun thinking about, we should probably figure out where we're going to go so we don't, impose this last minute task on our children. And we found a Jewish cemetery in this otherwise very non-Jewish area. There is a Jewish community there, and certainly one that is bigger than we knew now. But at the time, we found this Jewish cemetery. And so it was February, and we had to get her body back from Brooklyn and the Upper West Side to Toronto, and then east, 2 hours east, to this Jewish cemetery. And we buried her. And, then I started to think about this wildflower garden that I wanted to plant. Mm-hmm. I wanted to make her this garden, memorial garden that would be open and people can sit and visit, and it'd be very beautifully done. And we didn't realize that this cemetery was actually quite Orthodox.
Yes.
And all the headstones were from the same company in this black marble. It was quite small, but it was like a flat lawn with, headstones. And initially, when I told them the plans to make a little garden area, they were like, yeah, that's fine. And then as we got closer and closer, they said, no, we can't do this. We can't allow it. It'll just look too different. At which point I had just discovered a non-denominational, but absolutely stunningly beautiful historic cemetery closer to where we were, closer to our summer cottage, near where there were all these things that she used to love to visit. And they were willing to let us do whatever we wanted. And so I think much to the others'
Chagrin.
surprise, was, it wasn't something we wanted to do. It was kind of traumatic, but we moved her.
Yes.
And I could hear Miranda, because this cemetery, as I've described it, is not very aesthetic. It wasn't aesthetic. It was off a highway near where we are, and it was Orthodox. And even in the midst of this awful task of transferring her, and we're following the car, the hearse in which she's been put in. And I just start to laugh because I can hear Miranda saying, "Mom, what were you thinking?
Yeah.
Burying me off a highway amongst all these Orthodox people," because she identified very strongly as Jewish, but she did not identify herself as Orthodox. So when she was reburied in her spot, it's just beautiful. And people go and sit and just visit with her, even though they don't know her. It's just such a tranquil, lovely spot in this otherwise beautiful, tranquil, historic cemetery.
What do you think about the Jewish tradition of visiting and before you leave, placing a little stone on
I love it.
on the headstone? What do you love about it?
Well, first of all, nobody knows. I went to look. Nobody knows really why we do that. And there are all kinds of, guesses. But in the end, that's just what we do. And first of all, stones are more permanent than flowers.
That's it.
They, I don't put fresh flowers on Miranda when I'm leaving, the area, because I don't want there to be dead flowers left around. But also, what we did in this case was actually we made her headstone out of something called pressed earth, which is actually an ancient technique for making a kind of turning some, loose dirt into concrete. And in that pressed earth, we were able to collect stones from around the world. Like friends in Israel sent rocks from, her favorite places. Friends in California, friends in Toronto. I collected them from, where she was born. Like all of that was then shipped to us. And as they were pouring, you pour in these different layers and then you tamp them down and they harden. They're in a mold. We were able to put all these rocks from all over into her headstone. And then when we did her memorial service the year later, a little more than a year because we wanted to not do it in February, that I encouraged people, Jews and non-Jews, to bring a stone with something, a saying, a thought, whatever they wanted, carved on it, which you can get over Etsy, easy, that said something on it, and that we could place around the garden, just something that made them think of Miranda or was inspired by Miranda. And so when you go into her garden now, there are also all these stones with just beautiful, sometimes lines of poetry, sometimes quotes from novels, or quotes from the Bible. And so it's a real place now to linger. And like literally every aspect of it is infused with meaning. So that is some compensation or comfort, to having to visit your child's grave with her name carved on it.
I mentioned at the top of this interview today, what a beautiful person I believe you are. I think you are. And I'm going to guess most people who know you feel the same. As an example, when I was doing my research, I came across a piece that you did on Reddit. And what was so beautiful about it, Danielle, was that essentially you reached out to people. You said, I've lost my daughter, and here's what happened. And if you have any questions for me about grief, or my situation, things that could help you, by all means. And then people started to ask you questions on Reddit.
Yeah, there's a feature on Reddit called Ask Me Anything.
And I thought, my gosh, firstly, what a strong person you are. How you use social media to get through your grief, and how beautiful it is that you reach out to people, many of whom are in similar situations or have been, to share your grief with them, to share your wisdom, and to perhaps to make their load a little bit lighter.
Well, it's a feature. Thank you. Thank you for those kind words. But it's a feature that, you know, ask me anything. I'm an
Yeah,
astronaut. You know, ask me.
right.
And so when I was invited to do Ask Me Anything on this, and you get a lot of, you know, Reddit is not known for its always most thoughtful,
True.
compassionate.
That is true. Yes.
I mean, when I was doing it live, B called me and I said, B, I'm in the middle of Ask Me Anything. Ask Me Anything. She said, oh, you'd rather talk to a bunch of incels rather than your own daughter. She was joking. But there were no trolls of any kind. It was such a beautiful and remarkable
It is.
conversation that we began to have. And many, as you say, they reached out, they told their stories, but then they would also say, hey, I'm 6 years later, I'm still physically grieving. Is this weird? You know, and then other people, not just me, began to weigh in. And I did promise, you know, normally you do it for a few hours and then that's it. But I said, I mean, I can go back to that thread anytime. And I said, I will answer every question you have, even if it wasn't posted that day. And I've made a point of going back every 2 or 3 days and answering the new questions that get posted. So it's now an ongoing conversation with the Reddit readers. So
Good for you. It's beautiful what you've done. You know, Danielle, I been working with AI over the last number of months, asking it to produce odes to poems about my guests. So I have an ode to you, to David, to your
Aw.
children, Miranda, and I'd like to read it to you.
Is this from Claude? Did Claude make this? Did Claude
This is
make
ChatGPT, actually.
this? Okay.
Danielle Crittenden walks through ashes carrying the name Miranda like a candle that refuses extinction. Once she wrote about culture, politics, marriage, the architect of modern life. Then one February morning, life tore in half with a telephone call. Before, after. A daughter gone at 32, and suddenly the world becomes coffins, paperwork, burial dresses, grocery aisles that detonate memory like hidden mines beneath the heart. She writes grief not as poetry, but as weather, violent, shapeless, inescapable, a pick stabbing endlessly at the chest, a nervous system forgetting the balance, a mother hearing her own cries, animal sounds in the night. And yet Miranda lives everywhere, in photographs that ambush the phone screen, in stories friends still whisper, in flowers she planted inside other people, in the unbearable miracle that love outlives breath. Danielle joined what she calls the world's worst club, parents wandering in an alternative universe where time no longer behaves properly, where yesterday's laughter becomes today's coffin shopping. Still, she rises, morning after morning, through panic attacks and silence, through the bureaucracy of death, through marriages that sometimes collapse beneath sorrow's weight. Beside her stands David, steady as a damaged soldier in a tank unit, holding together what remains of family while grief circles overhead like smoke. But Danielle teaches something else too, that memory is resistance, that speaking the dead aloud keeps them walking beside us, that the holiest sentence may simply be, this sucks, but I am here. Dispatches from Grief is not a book about death. It is a mother standing in the ruins with empty hands full of love, and Miranda, radiant, adventurous, laughing Miranda, still moves through every page like light through broken stained glass.
Oh my gosh.
I'll send it to
Can
you.
I hire ChatGPT?
I know.
That is extraordinary.
I know.
Oh, Avrum, I can't even speak. That is.
I'm going to send it to you, okay?
Yes, please do. That is incredible. Thank you. Who says Chat GPT doesn't have a heart?
Exactly. That's my feeling exactly. A huge heart. But I want people to buy your book, Dispatches from Grief, and I want to encourage them to do that by telling them a quick review. David Brooks, New York Times columnist and best-selling author of The Second Mountain, he writes, "Dispatches from Grief moves with the power of a freight train over rough terrain." I mentioned this before, but I want to repeat it. Danielle Crittenden makes us eyewitnesses to the hour-by-hour crawl through grief. What I will remember forever is the transformation of the griever, the steady, unpredictable process of ripping and restitching. It's beautiful what he writes. And the resilient enormity of a mother's love. Crittenden has been through hell, but has not emerged with empty hands. You know, so many people reviewed this, both people on Amazon, just regular folk, and professional writers. There was one thing, and I'd like to close the interview with this because it really boggled my mind, is that Miranda had a dog. And you wrote that at some point in the evening after her death, that it was howling throughout the night. Right?
He didn't, Ringo, he didn't howl
Ringo.
throughout the night. There was like, I think twice this happened where he would be sleeping. It would be 3 a.m, and suddenly he would unleash these unearthly howls that were like keening, you know, and it would wake me up, and then I'd go to check that he was okay, and he would just be deep asleep, and it was almost like he was grieving. It's almost, I almost imagine Miranda coming to him in his dreams, and yeah, who know? I mean, dogs are incredible. I would advocate that anyone who is in grief have a dog. My little dog really helped me.
I totally agree with you. Last comment, please. You have a very unique position because you're well read. Many people know about you. Having gone through what you've gone through, what you're going through, you and David and your children, God bless you. You should be well for many years. What can you share? Your final comment to people who are going through something similar.
I think some of it will sound cliche, but you have to be gentle on yourself. You don't put a timetable on yourself. The thing that I aspire to, and this was told to me by another grieving mother, and I write this, that you have to look not just on your child's life as having been a gift to you. You have to relearn to see your own life as a gift and to not squander it, even though every fiber of your being may not value it at this moment. And that's what I just keep trying to do, is learn to be present in the moment, learn to enjoy what is happening, take comfort in beauty, and then eventually I hope to be able to see my own life not just as something I live for others, but something I live for myself too.
Will you be with Miranda again?
I hope so. My mother is certain of it, but she remains Anglican. The Jews are a little more vague on that point, but I very much hope so.
How is your mom?
She's good. She's 90, and they were very, very close. She's been a support to me, as mothers are.
Yes.
But yeah, it really takes effort to keep going, and that's what it's important to remember for anyone else going through this. It's not easy, and no one does it any better. It's just day to day and effort.
Danielle, you're very inspiring to me, and I'm sure inspiring to many of my viewers and listeners. Thank you for doing this. I'm very grateful.
Thank you for having me, and thank you for such a beautiful interview. And thank you, Chat GPT. That was
yes, thanks, Chat GPT. Exactly. My love to you, my love to your husband and your family, and I wish you well and health and celebrations, as we say in Jewish simchas, all the days of your life. And I thank you for this book. It's available on Amazon. Where else can people find it?
Actually, in your Canadian viewers, it's Heather Reisman, who owns Indigo and Chapters, made it one of her picks.
Yes.
Which I was very honored by. And so it's right currently now in the front of all Indigo bookstores.
Yeah, right.
So if you have a bookstore near you, you should be able to find it there as well.
Yeah, I know I'm acting like a Jewish mother that refuses to hang up when they're on the phone with their child. But my last question for sure, would Miranda like the book?
You know, I've gone back and forth on that. And when I was getting ready to publish it, I asked her about it. This was one of I had a projected conversation, and then I had one of those conversations where her voice landed in my head.
Yes.
So the first conversation I had, which I projected, I imagined her saying, well, Mom, if you needed to write it, you know, I support that. And that absolutely, she was always a great booster and supporter. And if you think it will help people, you know, that will be good too. And am I allowed to swear on your program?
Yeah, swear away. Yes.
Okay. And what, you want a book about me to be a fucking failure? So that was
well said. Well said.
Heard her say. And then as the publication drew closer and I was falling asleep and I was having the same conversation, but this time very sleepily, and I wasn't projecting, I just said, you know, well, Miranda, I guess at least this will keep your memory alive in the world. And then I heard her say very sharply, no, Mom, the book isn't going to be what keeps my memory alive. You are going to keep my memory alive. And to only if you live in italics. And that, I think, is closer to what she would say.
Yeah, well done. Kol hakavod. A big hug.
Thank you. Hug back.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for listening and for watching. Read the book. As I said, it's available at Amazon in Canada, in all the major bookstores. Well worth reading to understand yourself if, God forbid, you've gone through this, or to help other people who are going through the loss of a child. As my dear mother, rest in peace, to say Zeigezint. Do you know what that means?
Zeigezint, no.
Where's your Yiddish?
I love Yiddish. I wish it were my second language because it's the greatest language ever.
It is. It really is. Zeigezint means basically go in good health. And until we meet again, thank you so much, Danielle.
Don't call me a schlemiel.
I will not call you a schlemiel or a schlemazel.
Or schlemazel.
Thank you so much.
All
We'll
right.
see each other soon. Take care. Thank you.